Hello, everyone. Happy New Year. Thanks for joining. So it's 2020. We have another year of wonderful guest interviews on our program. And today I would like to invite our first guest of the new year. So this is my friend, Jess Young. We're here at Jess Yoga Studio in Chicago, where I met Jess. So Jess is a yoga teacher here. She's also down in Boston, which we'll talk about in a second. But we met here through doing some tea classes that I teach here at the studio every month. And so Jess is one of the teachers at Tejas and started coming to the tea classes. And
so good.
And I was so happy to welcome Jess onto the program and to chat with her because her path has now taken her to Boston, where she is in Harvard Divinity School.
That's right.
Doing some really, really beautiful work. And so to start the year, I wanted to have a conversation about the role of spirituality in our practice. Something that comes up a lot in the tea meditation classes to varying levels for different students. And so I love the insight that Jess brings as a writer, as a communicator. So thank you so much for being here.
I am so happy to be here. I have been so touched by your work and what it has allowed me to discover in my own life, and what I witness it provoking and opening for other people in their practices as well. So I was thrilled when you invited me to come, and I'm really delighted and quite humbled, quite frankly, to be with you today.
I was like, there's nobody else I want to have this conversation. Same. Conversations that I wanted to have in 2020. For example, I have a guest on in February to talk about changes in the coffee industry, and we're talking about the role of real social equity. What does it mean for us to spend the money that we have on this high quality product for people who don't get the same amount of that? How do we navigate that? And similar issues with tea.
Sure.
So when it comes to a subject like spirituality and bringing the role of the divine into tea practice, which maybe some people may not even consider as a realm for that.
Yeah.
Kind of the same way, like a new person to yoga, that might be a bit unfamiliar. So how do you navigate that?
Yeah. Oh, well, I'm hopeful that what I say will make sense and be of use to your viewers and your listeners. I can say that, as a yogi, as a yoga teacher, my body, the body, is a very large part of spirituality, spiritual experience, and so. Quite literally using your body to experience things, whether it's a cup of tea or a physical posture or in conversation or whatever, is a large way of what I know about how it means to be spiritual and to practice spiritual. So this work that you do and provide for folks felt very intuitive and well-fitting in the work that I do in my own life, as well as what I'm able to provide for folks.
Yeah. So when you first came to class and had some tea, do you remember what did it feel like to drink tea in that way? What did its kind of connections did it make for you for other things that you do?
I am conscious of wanting to answer questions quickly.
Oh no.
Okay. But I also like to think about what you've asked. Thank you. We're drinking some oolong today. It's really, really tasty. Maybe in the 21st century, in this next decade, there will be technologies that you can smell and taste what we have, but not today. It's coming. I think that before I took your classes, tea was something that I enjoyed, but took very lightly. I would brew it at home and have it, and for certain reasons and in certain pursuits, like, I'm feeling a little under the weather, I'm going to make a cup of tea, or, I want something warm to have with my book, I'm going to make a cup of tea, or, whatever. But didn't dwell with the experience. And so one of the quickest and most immediate things that I remember about the first class that you and I had together was the experience of the tea. It was like, there is nothing else for you to do. There is nowhere else for you to go. There is you and this water, right? Water that is solid and liquid and gas. It falls from the sky. We freeze it into chunks and put it in things or put it on things. And there's this plant, this leaf that we've plucked off this bush and roasted or dried or smoked or whatever we've done to it. And we put those together and we have them and then we see what comes. I remember very clearly you inviting us to do things like listen to the tea as it was hitting the sound of the bowl, like the sound of it hitting the bottom of the bowl, and how did it feel between our fingers after we drank or poured off the tea, and like what did it smell like, and it just felt like such a sensory experience, and that feels very like a very spiritual experience to me, and so it was, without any of the what's the right language? Without any of the other context of religion, right? It felt like a very spiritual or divine experience, right? This is a place where you meet other things that are created, and they provide you with a window into what is more, right? As I'm reading this book right now about icons by Madeline L'Engle, who also wrote the Wrinkle in Time series, and in a chapter of this book, I'm just getting started in it, but she wrote that an icon is a window into God. And so when you look at an icon, whether it's like a 2-foot square, like wooden image on which the face of Christ is painted with the halo, right, from like the Orthodox tradition, or it's a sacred candle that you light in ritual with a thing, or an altar piece, or in the case of this book that she's writing, if it's a penguin, right, that she's in Antarctica writing about these penguins and she's never experienced them before. But whatever the thing is, you look at it, you experience it, and it is a window into God. It is like a thing that allows you to see God. It pulls the veil back or opens up an aperture. And I think the tea experience was very much like that for me, right? So whether you've been baptized or what direction you pray to or like what language you use notwithstanding, like here is this experience that will allow you to see what is divine apart from all of that, and not in any sort of disrespect to any of that, right? But just also let us see God this way. Let us experience God this way. And it was really very powerful for me. And I think that it's not the way that I was raised to experience God. And it's not a way that I see in the traditions that I practice. It's not something that I see people doing or practicing very much. And so I was excited about the possibility of being able to facilitate the experience of God for other folks in a way that is like also with some of the traditions that they're more comfortable with or accommodating or accustomed to,
I love that.
Does that answer your question?
I love that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Do you see some similarity in perhaps how people have come to yoga classes then? Like they're not expecting to see that, and then all of a sudden they realize something's there? I do. It's almost like a switch that is turned, veil is language I use on purpose because this is language that comes out of the tantric tradition, right? Is that the created world, the manifest world we know around us is Maya, right? Which is also the name of a goddess in the Hindu tradition. But it is easy for us to confuse the stuff of life for God, but there is God beyond the stuff of life, right? Now, I may get this wrong. So I want to put that caveat on the table. I might get this wrong. Google it and see if I'm wrong. But the tantrics like to use again your experience again as that pulling back of that veil, as that discovery, right? But it is possible in all things, right? In good things and not so good things, and horrible things and scary things. That ecstasy. It can all show you God, right? So whether it's good or bad on a trajectory, like it all shows you. And I very much had that experience. I had that experience as a yogi. I think it is available for everyone, but not everyone is interested That's what they would call the non-dual teaching, right?
Yes,
it's not
very
a
much.
polar north-south, good, bad. It just
is.
Yeah.
And it's, again, not how I was raised, not how I think most of us are raised, or many of us. And I think it is challenging to hold some of the things that we experience as really terrible or really brilliantly beautiful, and understand that beyond that attachment or aversion relative to that experience is just the thing, right? And so can we set aside the desire, the affection, the attachment? Can we set aside the terror, the anger, the aversion, and just sort of be with what is, right? That is not an easy thing to do. And I mean, even in an experience that's embodied, like yogasana, or like having a cup of tea, right? You might have a tea and be like, wow, this is really bitter. I don't like bitter tea. Okay, all right.
And all of a sudden you're separate from the
Exactly. And like in yourself, like small y, you, small I, right? But like what happens if you can be like, okay, I'm experiencing an aversion to this, right? Okay, I'm gonna be with that and then let that go. What else is available? What more is available, you know? And so I think that one of the interesting things about yoga in our country, in our culture, is that I think because religion is so charged a thing, the religious nature or even spiritual, right? If those words don't mean the same thing, I so much of my life exists in that sort of Venn diagram space.
Yeah.
So I'm probably going to do that and talk about that a lot. But I think that religion and spirituality are more like overlapping circles in a Venn diagram than they are like, I think there's an intersection of them and not an empty intersection. But I was just trying to say that that in yoga in the West, we've removed the spiritual away from the yoga. And so when you practice yoga in the West, you really have to try to look for the place where it intersects with spirituality. Because I think that a lot of times you can avoid it if you want to, you know? I don't want to, but I also find it is better for me when I don't. That if I come into a class or I even step onto my mat in my own practice and I allow for the possibility that there will be more than just my muscles and joints and bodies or bones moving in space, but that I might touch something or ask a question and get an answer, or just feel a feeling and like feel that feeling in relationship to whatever else there is for me to be with. I have had a better experience. I've had a better practice for that space that I've made than if I'm just like, all right, well, my hamstrings are tight, so I just want to loosen those up, you know, or whatever.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I started to feel that way about tea after, it's a field I've been working in for a very long time, but I had this kind of, very trade-oriented, technical way that was my public-facing, even when privately I had my own practice and studied tea ceremony and things like that, and I felt so disconnected. It was weird to avoid in the more public-facing arena of that, talking about the substance of what's there. It felt like it was stripping it down.
There's something that you are not meeting, or being maybe even dishonest or something about.
It felt weird. It felt weird to not do that, and it's been really inspiring to see, yogis such as yourself who navigate that and bring that together for people in a way that's really, really approachable. Because every person for their own can meet that how they want, but to avoid it altogether is a long road of personal harm.
Yeah, I agree. I want to be a yoga teacher who is not afraid to have conversations with students about God, and like who is unafraid to use that word in the classroom. I found that in the last several years, this is part of what motivated me to go back to school and to go to divinity school particularly, is that I wanted to have these conversations about like what we were doing with our bodies in this room, what we were doing with our bodies on the street, and the relationship between those two things and our relationship to God, our relationship to the divine. And are those things all in alignment, or are we very different versions of ourselves in relationship to like which way we're going, right? And I found that like we were very different versions. I love using that second person pronoun, but I can say I was different versions of myself and wanted them to be the same, right? And also, like I saw it. I saw people and I wanted them to be the same, and they weren't. And I was like, oh, I need to have conversations about why that is and how to do that differently. And I don't feel equipped with the vocabulary or frankly, the generosity or the compassion, the capacity to hold space for people so that they can have these conversations, because they're not easy, right? I mean, I would imagine that it's really difficult to be a person who is even willing to acknowledge that, like, I'm one version of myself in the yoga space, on the mat, on the cushion. I'm another version of myself on the street, on the bus, on the job, and I'm a different version of myself in prayer or in the temple or synagogue. And I want that. I want sort of splitted nature, right? Or the idea of integrating those versions of myself scares me, because it's going to ask me to do some stuff I don't want to do, or it's going to make me feel a way I don't want to feel, or whatever, right? And so that requires a kind of bravery for someone to acknowledge that and to say that. And I wanted to be a person who could ask people that, and also like hold enough space for them to be able to be brave and to say those things. But I didn't have the skills, which is why I'm back in school, so I can build those skills.
That's why I did teacher training too. So I don't know some of these things.
Yeah.
So we talked about the idea of practice. The word practice is something that I really love. It's an interesting term. I had a discussion a couple months ago with my husband, who's an artist, about the nature of the word practice. Because for the field of artists and musicians, practice is something kind of rooted in this idea that you're doing it to get better at a thing.
It's a linear process, right?
And then for yogis or people who are in contemplative arts, it's not. It's a very different term. So how do you, for people who might be new to using that word, so there's new to using the word spiritual, there's new to using the word God, there's new to using the word practice. How do you help introduce that concept to people, what it is to have practice?
That's a really great question. I am currently teaching a lot less than I used to teach, right? When I was living here in Chicago, I was teaching 5 to 7 days a week. And in Boston now, I'm teaching maybe once or twice a month. And I miss it deeply. Thank you. So I want to answer this question in a way that reflects what I have said to students in the past, and also what I would say to students in the present and future. Time being what it is, that may not be possible, but I'm going to do my best. Right. Ralph Ellison talked about it as a spiral, right? Yes. So I also really love the word practice, because it feels, again, in this linear circular question, it feels like a river that flows in a circle, right? A river is never the same when you step into it. So, if I went down to the Chicago River and I stepped into it, but like if I did it, and then like literally the next day, if I did it again, it would be a different river because of the nature of the movement of the water. And at the same time, practice isn't or doesn't have to be where you are now and an objective that you need to achieve. It can just be like, what is it today? What happens today? Who are you today? Where are you today? What are you today? And there's something very comforting and very grounding, I think, in that. And so one of the things I like to offer students who are newer to yoga or newer to the idea of a practice is that, particularly yoga students, is that it doesn't have to look like anything special, and it doesn't have to be this long, massive thing. It has to serve you. And it has to be something that you can return to and feel okay about returning to, right? Some days you will, and actually, I think I'm thinking a lot about liturgy, which is a word that I did not grow up using, but I've used a lot in the last 3 months at HDS. And it's not something that I'm accustomed to. And I'm going to get it wrong again. I'm going to get it wrong. But I am going to try to call in the room the spirit of my teacher at HDS. His name is Matthew Potts. He taught my Intro to Ministry Studies class. And one of the things that he taught me is the word liturgy means the work of the people, right? And it's Greek, I think. I think it's Greek. I haven't taken any Greek yet, so I can't say for sure. And it is a word that describes again, I'm going to get it wrong, the order by which services are conducted in various Christian traditions. So there is a liturgy for a funeral. There's a liturgy for a wedding. There's a liturgy for a baptism service. There's a liturgy for...
That's how I've heard it.
Yes, like the Eucharist or the communion on a Sunday or whatever, right? There are certain things that you say at certain times, and there are certain things that you do with your body, right? And this is something also, again, I didn't grow up with. I grew up in conservative Black churches, and there was an order for service, but no one called it a liturgy. And it was very freeform, like we did certain things, but we didn't do them in an order, and it was very freeform. It's just a different way to worship. So in the churches that I'm attending and attending now, I'm observing that the liturgy feels very structured. But one of the things that Dr. Potts taught me is that liturgy is, right? In a similar way that practice is. And some days you feel great, you feel connected, you feel fired up, you feel filled with the Spirit or like really jazzed about whatever. And you step into practice, you step into liturgy, and it's all cooking. And some days you're tired because you didn't sleep, or you had an argument with your spouse, or your kid was sick. And some days you're grumpy because something is going wrong. And some days you're angry because the world sucks and you're mad at God about it, right? Or you're mad at somebody else about it. But the liturgy, the practice is, right? On those great days, on those lousy days, on those empty days, on those average days, the liturgy, the practice is just there. It's like it's like a structure that just holds you and lets you step into it, and you feel however you're gonna feel. And maybe something in practice happens, and maybe it doesn't, but you trust the structure of that thing so that it can hold you whenever you need it to. And some days you're like, I'm good, I got this. And you can kind of bring your own prana, you can bring your own steam to the energy, to the liturgy, to the practice. And some days you really need the structure, And so I like to think, and I like to describe practice as that, this touchstone, this structure that serves you, that can show up for you in your day-to-day life, right? The practice doesn't deplete you so that when you're finished with it, you can't go to work, you can't be with your family, you can't do whatever. You can still do life, but it serves you, it meets you, and it provides when you need it to and when you don't need it to. It's always there. And that is how I like to think about practice. And at my best, that is how I like to practice, And it's certain, like that the nature of repetition and routine. I mean, and this is true in Ayurveda as well, is so grounding and so nurturing and healing. And so I talk to people about, 10 minutes a day. If their lives will only permit that, I'm like, great, do that, because it will
counts more than hours.
Absolutely. It will show up for you, So, I mean, maybe that answers your question. Like that's, and again, that word liturgy is new, but like, I think I've taken the word, the idea of what that liturgy is and sort of woven it into what I know of practice to be. And so I've been thinking a lot about communion. And so I'm like, I have to hold these two in the same space. Liturgy is not just this like thing where they tell me like, stand up and say this. Okay, sit down and say this. And now stand up and sing this. And now sit down and be quiet. And, it's not just, kind of exactly the form itself, but it is a kind of structure that I get to meet and be held in and relate to God in or not, and that resonates in a way that nothing else has it before. So I'm like, now I know what this is. Okay, great.
I think something else too that came to mind while you were explaining was the idea that what can be so comforting about a practice when we look at it from that point of view is that every day and every session you're starting new.
Yes.
There's not the expectation that it needed to be what it was yesterday or even an hour before what it's going to be tomorrow.
Yep.
So it's not linear practice. It's just, this is what it is in that moment.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of teachers say, practice with the body you have today, right? And in that way, the river is never the same, right? You could do this shape in your body, unattached, without any props, without any assists. Beautiful, brilliant. You come to the mat tomorrow and you try it and you fall over. Fine, right? This is where you are today. Don't judge it. Let it be what it is. This is great. What can you observe? What can you discover? Fine. let it go. What happens tomorrow, you know? Very much so, yes. Yeah.
So can you share a little bit about like the studies that you're doing at Harvard Divinity School, and where you see yourself going from there? And is this something that you've had in mind for a while, or is it kind of new you realize, okay, I think I need something else to help me get to where I want to be?
Sure. Let's see, how should I answer this question? I am pursuing a Masters of Divinity at HDS, at Harvard Divinity School. I am one semester into a 3-year program, so it's still really very early. And it is, I've described it like Oz. I don't know if this is true, but I feel like my memory, and I haven't read the book, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, but I have seen the movie many, many times. And my memory of Oz and the wizard was that he was great and terrible. And that is how my first semester at HDS felt, great and terrible. I don't have a lot of clarity on what I will be doing when I graduate. I can say that I am aware of a desire to be with people in very lean, complex, lean is really just the best word I have, lean moments of their lives. So ritual, maybe it's clear by now, is very important to me, and it feels very resonant as a way of living. And we have a lot of ritual around life moments, birth, marriage, death. We don't have a lot of ritual around like the beginnings and endings of relationships. Maybe there should be. And then there are like ritual ages and like landmarks, like retirement or your 50th or 40th or 21st or 16 or whatever. And so like these moments of life, and some of these are leaner than the others, right? 21st birthday, not as lean a moment maybe as someone's death. Yeah. Let's just put that on the table, right? Here's hoping. But I am aware of this desire within myself to be present with people during these lean moments of their lives. And so that might mean chaplaincy, that might mean parish ministry, or, like what to be like a pastor or a minister in a church. I think there are some qualities of parish ministry in particular that I find really interesting, and some qualities of it that I find absolutely terrifying. So I'm curious about that and whether that will develop, right? There's this language that feels like very Christian language about like calling, right? And I remember being a young woman in Black churches, and I have a deep love for the Black church, and I don't want to speak about it like it's a monolith, because it's not, right? And there are qualities of the churches that I grew up in that feel like Black churches all over America. But one of the memories I have as a young woman is seeing these young men, 14, 16, 18, step into the pulpit and say that God has called them to preach. And sort of wondering, like, what exactly does that mean? Like, did he ring you on the phone? How do you know you got a call from God and this wasn't your ego?
I had a similar experience in a church too, and obviously it was a 16-year-old. It was not a 16-year-old boyfriend. It was kind of the same thing. I was like, I really had that same kind of conversation. Like, what is that?
It's not uncommon at all, and it felt very common in like Black churches, and James Baldwin is one of my favorite writers, and he's written a series of fictional narratives about young Black men in the church who were called early to preach, and some people know that early, and I can say that like I did not know as a 13-year-old, as a 16-year-old, that God wanted me to do anything, And so whatever that is, if that is what my life's work is to be, I don't know what it will look like to know that, And so that's one of the questions I'm asking myself is like, what is this notion of calling? And how will I know when it happens? And, because there are, again, qualities that are very physiological. There's sensations I have when I know like, oh, okay, this is a thing I need to do. The decision to go back to school was a very physiological one. I felt in my body, like, okay, this is right. Is this right? Oh yeah, this is right. This is right. It was like magnetized or echoing in a way. So I'm curious, like, is that what calling is like? I don't know, Is it different for every person? Is it like an ache in my elbow? Like, how will I know, So I can say that I'm interested in that. I also have a deep affection and a sense of great drive, ambition around showing up for women's health concerns, right? It is a complex world we live in. It is a hard world. It is hard to be a woman in our world. I don't know that it's ever been easy to be a woman in this world, but it feels as hard as it ever was. And I must do what I can to ensure that women and our health and our ability to care for ourselves in any way that we choose is provided for. I must. And that is work that I have been doing for some time. Yes, I used to serve at Chicago Women's Health Center. I still give. It's a great organization. Google it. It's awesome. And so that is work that is very close to my heart, and it is work that I cannot not do. So I don't yet know how the work that I am cultivating as a divinity school student and what will come of it will intersect that work. But I know that I am interested in using the skills that I cultivate to show up for women and folks who need me to show up in that context, right? So I know that. And again, I'm interested in chaplaincy. I'm interested in being with people who are in various states of dealing with their bodies and healing, and that feels like chaplaincy on some level. Yeah. You know, I mean, there are all kinds of chaplaincy, right? I read a book recently, or I read a chapter of a book recently about a chaplain who serves for the park services in the state of Maine, right? So she goes out with these like rangers, and they do stuff, and she shows up. She's present for these people when they are talking to hunters about things, or when they're hosting or leading search and rescue parties or whatever, right? And then there are chaplains in the military, which is, again, a really compelling way of serving. It's really hard for me to imagine doing so, only because I have such powerful vitriolic feelings about armed services. I'm super, super grateful for people who know that is their way to serve and who choose to serve that way. And I feel so conflicted about it that I don't know how I would show up. I'm not saying I couldn't, I just don't know. But there are lots of different kinds of ways to be a chaplain, and so I'm interested in like what that means. Like there's with again the nature of the world that we live in now, and people in the streets asserting their rights and communicating their distrust and frustration and anger and dissatisfaction with the systems of oppression that are running our world. There's a lot of movement chaplaincy, and so I'm interested in what that means, you know? So again, and these feel like lean moments, right? Pick up a weapon and ride into battle with it, or pick up a sign and ride into battle with it, or these moments of like nature and life and death and struggle. Like that is what it is to be human, right? What it is to exist. And so like, what does it mean to be present with and for people as they are wrestling with that, you know? So like that's an interest too. How it takes shape, what it looks like, I don't yet know, but I know that I'm interested. Yeah,
I love it.
Thanks.
You know, something that I'm hearing as maybe a common theme is education and access to education. Because it seems like perhaps some of the misunderstandings or just feelings of just not knowing how to sit with vocabulary that people hear, like the idea, what does chaplaincy look like? What is ministry? What is the nature of God? Things like that. Like as you say earlier, it's so loaded in the U.S. And I wonder if some of that is just simply not enough access to education to have these discussions openly. That it doesn't come with an agenda, because it seems like so many more people could not be benefited from just the understanding of it in terms of enriching their own life, but they may discover something about themselves that they could then contribute to society if they felt they could navigate what that looked like.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is a large part of it, right? There's a YouTube video that maybe everyone has seen by now, but I keep talking about it because I feel like if we haven't seen it, you should see it. And if we haven't seen it, we should watch it again. It's been a while. Called The Danger of the Single Story. It's a TED Talk given by a writer named Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, I think is how you say her name. And she's from Nigeria. She's written a lot. She wrote a book recently called We Should All Be Feminists, I think is what it was called. But so this was years ago that she gave this talk, and she talked about the nature of a story, like our conception of a thing being one thing, right? And for instance, if the word ministry only ever means a white man in a black suit with a collar who stands in a pulpit and talks about stuff and asks people to give him money, right? Anytime we hear the word ministry, that's what we're going to call up, and whatever our association with that is, whether it's attachment or aversion, is also going to come along, right? But if we are able to open our capacity to understand what ministry is, right? Maybe ministry is maybe ministry is an organization of nuns that are maybe secular, who are not always women, who are also men, or queer folk who identify in a number of ways, who are all over America and parts of Europe and maybe South America as well. And their job is to go into LGBTQ communities and provide care and education about AIDS and HIV prevention and things like that. And we think of that as ministry also. And it's like the nun that we think is not just like this uptight, ruler spanking, like rigid woman, but like there's space for it to be this other thing, these other things, right? A nun can be Buddhist, a nun can be Hindu, a nun can, like all these things. What will that allow us to access, right? I also think that there's a lot of healing that needs to happen. There's a lot of harm, a lot of trauma, a lot of oppression that has been and is continuing to be enacted at the hands of religion, and particularly Christianity. But I would argue that there is no organized religion on our planet right now that has clean hands, and so
it's not to say that they should all be done away with. But
agreed, absolutely, absolutely,
because it's human nature.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You take something and then interpret it through human lens.
Mm-hmm.
It's just
you're bound to do it badly at times and places, yeah. And so, I mean, doing it badly is a gross understatement. Right? I recognize that. I acknowledge that. So I think that there's a lot of healing in order for folks, and when we are able to expand our conceptions of what we know religion to be, or God to be, or worship to be, or ministry to be, it allows the space for us to return to practices that we have been harmed by, couldn't return to. I can say personally that, again, the way that I was raised in a really conservative context around Christianity. And some of it was quite harmful and created distance for me between Christianity and like my own worship experience or my own spiritual experience that yoga has in large part helped me heal. And it has created enough space and enough healing for me to return to more, not orthodox, but perhaps stereotypical expressions of Christianity that 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I would have been like, I would have like, again, had a physical, visceral reaction to, but had a really hard time being close to and close with, So I think that is also a part of the work that needs to happen, right? That can happen. That is important when it comes to things like making meaning and connection and relationship, things that feel very important when our country is divided, when our world is divided, when you don't have to look far or work hard to see harm and fear and violence, as a way that people are being. They are expressing themselves in these just harmful, tortured, oppressive, violent ways, right? Because we're afraid and because we're confused. And so education, I think, is a large part of it. And I think that healing is a large part of it. And I think that, I think that if we and when we can do that kind of work in ourselves, with one another, with and for other people, I think that good stuff can happen. But I think that it's a bit trite, I suppose, and I have found it to be frustrating at times for this sort of like adage that like it has to start inside, right? Because I'm like, okay, sure, but there are also massive systems that are oppressing people. Like, don't talk to me about it starts inside. Like, let's talk about the systems and how to fix that, right? I want to acknowledge that as well.
Yes.
So I think it has to start everywhere, right?
There's going to be balance to that because this is brought up in around discussions around self-care and things like that. There's self is of course important, but the longer, I think perhaps the longer you linger in that kind of area, you really start to see self as separate. From others. And so it has to be done something where it's in balance. Like there's time for self, of course, with the idea that it helps you to be able to integrate with. Because if all you're just like here taking care of self all the time, then it's just checking out. It's not really improving anything.
I agree completely. I remember writing, I don't know, maybe in the last couple of years about that idea, about the practice of like when self-care becomes like self-medication, right? Like I will absolutely acknowledge the reality that like sometimes self-care is you on the couch with a giant piece of chocolate cake and like your favorite season of whatever, you know, and do that for as long as you need to, but then know when it's time to stop. And like now self-care is like dentist, which is my least favorite like adulting activity, but like so important. Or like, I don't know, updating your driver's license, or making a budget, or, just hitting the gym, or whatever it is, right? These are all self-care things too. And it's not always gonna look like a day at the spa. And it's not always gonna feel like totally decadent and really great, but like it has to be all of those things because like you said, you put in so you can put out. And if you're just putting in and not putting out, then like, what is happening? Who are you at that point, right? And who are you in relationship to the rest of us? Because you are in relationship to the rest of us, right? Even if you decide to go live in a cave in like West Virginia or Wyoming, or like in the deserts of Colorado or Arizona or New Mexico, like you are in relationship to the rest of us. Just like I am in the relationship to the rest of us, right? So balance is critical. Yeah.
Something else that like it kind of comes to mind, the concept of like stewardship. It seems like that relates a lot to what ministry like.
Agreed.
Service like. Have you read anything by Laura Van?
No.
She is the founder of an organization in Seattle called the Trauma Stewardship Institute.
Oh, I think I have a book about trauma stewardship on my shelf at home.
Okay. So she's written a couple books, and she talks about, in her first book, she interviews a lot of people who are in helping professions, people in ministry, people who are first responders, people who are therapists, people who are environmentalists, who often see like enormous trauma where the world doesn't care. You know? And she talks about how we navigate those spaces of having to hold and to take care and to see people through such difficult times while also not losing track of ourselves. It seems like to me like that is also what ministry is, being the stewardship for human experience.
Oh, that is so, can I write that down? That is so beautiful.
I love her. I was really drawn to her work because I started to kind of feel this bit of a tug myself, like 2016, 2017, I felt it, where, we kind of start to take stock of what we can and we can't give, what is within our means and our ability, and what feels like something organic and natural, what we can do. And some people, that is community organizing, that's being on the front line, that's protesting, that is throwing their bodies into and not everyone is built for that. And so I started thinking, well, what could I do? And I was like, well, I have a team. And so is there a way that I can do that feels a little bit more, or a lot more, like it's purposefully trying to show up in those places, trying to be in those places for the benefit of other people. Because otherwise it's just this kind of like foo-foo practice for people who have money to accumulate the things and to sit and make themselves feel good about being sorry.
Enjoy.
And it feels really awkward to practice that in this time right now. And it arguably probably always should have felt awkward. But I think a lot of us are waking up to things that we have been doing that allowed us to check out. And that could be the same for, your dream yoga membership.
Absolutely.
Like that. It's like,
Absolutely.
Is there a better
way to manifest this? You're so right. I don't have anything to add. I agree completely. Like, I don't put more words into the air. I agree completely.
So, like, The classes that you're teaching in Boston right now, are they just primarily for students in your cohort? Or
They are.
In the public?
You know, I have had people from the public come and take the classes. And we fortunately get them to sign releases, which is a great relief. But by and large, the student population, the HDS specific population, are the makeup of the classes. And so in some way that's nice because like they're going through what I'm going through, and a lot of them are first years. So like we are in the same classes together, right? We have the same midterm schedule. We all have the same paper due on this day or whatever. And so I'm able to kind of tailor the practice, or at least speak to them about like, I have a sense of what your life is because it looks at least a little bit like my own, right? Maybe not entirely, but at least a little bit. And there's you know, I've talked a lot about my experience with HDS recently because I've been home and telling people who I haven't seen in months, like, here's what's happening. And I think my husband recently said this, that like, it's refreshing to be able to talk about these complex, often very charged ideas about religion with people who are just really willing to speak freely about it, you know? I mean, and
let's say I wanted to ask you about was the experience of navigating something that can often be really personal, really private, and individual.
Yes.
In a more community.
Yeah. It's so cool. I mean, and don't let me mislead you. We are all bringing our own baggage to that conversation. So this is not a group of like enlightened, beings who have all done all of the work, and now you're just coming to have really great conversations with one another and then going out to exactly. It's not that. It ain't that, right? We are all struggling. We are all like, it is really real. It's gritty and it's sweaty and it's bloody and it's struggling, right? And it's conflicted, you know. And we're just willing to talk about it. We're willing to have, I think, at times, some uncomfortable conversations about things like white supremacy and its role in the academy, about the perpetuation of, there's a specific word that describes, it's Christian supremacy is what it is, right? This idea that Christianity is kind of the lens through which most of us view the world, and other things have to be like sort of interjected so that we can see that like, not everyone views the world through this, this lens.
That America is not like freedom of religion. It's
right, of this religion, right? And not even that in some places, you know? So it's really compelling. And I'm loving it. But again, it is, I've also like borne witness to some really like challenging, like, oh, it's getting tight. It's getting kind of awkward in here. Like, let's lean into it. Can we do that? Are we strong enough? Are we brave enough? And I think, I mean, it's interesting to be in a place like Harvard and have these conversations. And I don't know anything about Harvard. I just got there, and so it has a kind of thing, like it has a reputation that goes before it, right? In its town, right? It might be even seen as kind of a bully. But Boston, it is. It's such a presence. Yeah. And I mean, Boston has like something like literally 57 different colleges and universities. Like, holy God, Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I would imagine, I can't say this with any experience or knowledge, but I would imagine that Harvard throws its weight around. I can say that I have heard people say that about Yale, right? Yale doesn't have the same like volume of places, like volume of colleges and universities that New Haven doesn't have the same volume that Boston does. But Yale is the largest landowner in New Haven, and there's some questionable tax and like that kind of anyway. But I mean, I'm sure that it's very similar in Boston, Cambridge, that like, Harvard is this giant presence, and so like it has all this weight, right? Yeah. And it also has this way of being in other places that aren't Boston, Cambridge, right? So like, I mean, it was not lost on me that like I took a class somewhere, not here at Tejas, but somewhere else recently, and had my Harvard tank top on, and I was like, oh, what does that mean? Like, are you going to read a thing in my body now because I have this shirt on myself, or like, can I just do my yoga? And so, but that also exists on campus and like in classes, right? So as a first year student, among other first year students, not exclusively, but largely, like half of my classes were required. And so half of them were like first year students specifically. And you know, there's this question of like, do I belong here? Who am I supposed to be here? What affect do I have to like engage here? Like, oh, I have to sound really smart, or I'm too afraid to sound smart, so I'm not going to say anything, or I'm going to say something stupid or whatever. And it's an obstacle, I think. But it's, you know, we fall into the trap of believing that Harvard is this thing, and so like we have to be a certain way when we're there, you know. So it's a strange place to be, but I feel like I've lost track of your question. Can you ask it again?
Oh, just in your experience, everything about.
Yeah. I mean, it's been lovely, but it's also really strange because of that mystique. And I feel, you know, the average age of people in my cohort is about like 29, 30. I am older than that by not a little, you know. And there are some quite young people in my cohort, and so I am made aware of my age in a way that I haven't been in a while. Yeah. And I mean, and it's not a neutral thing, right? Yeah. We live in a country that worships, not prioritizes, but like worships youth and beauty. And so to know that I'm getting older and then to be confronted by it in relationship with younger people is not an easy thing. It is a thing I am feeling, you know? And so that like, because I am older than a lot of the people I'm in classes with, I know a thing or two about like, oh, this is an affect. Listen, we don't have to buy into this bullshit if we decide we don't want to. Am I allowed to curse on your video? Okay. Okay. We don't have to do this. We can do this differently. But not everyone knows that yet, right? Or, you know, this is not my first graduate degree, right? And one of the things that I learned the last time I was in grad school was like, I am an active participant in my own education. I decide how much I learn, not the teacher at the front of the room. And I'm always going to learn something if I choose to. Even if I'm in a classroom I don't really want to be in, or in a class that I'm not that excited about taking, I'm going to learn something if I decide that. And not everyone has discovered that yet, you know? Yeah. And so I see people who are kind of like checked out or like leaning away from their own education, or who are wasting. It just comes at them. Yeah, exactly. It's very linear. It's very hierarchical. And I'm like, no. And there's a book that I read the last time I was a teacher, before I started teaching yoga, I was teaching creative writing at an art school here in Chicago. Yeah. And I was gifted this book by the sort of teacher resource center there called Teaching to Transgress by Bell Hooks. And one of the things I learned, yeah, it's incredible. One of the things I learned from that book was about round versus vertical nature of the classroom, and how most classrooms are built in this sort of like, here's the knowledge bank, right, in your teacher, and that knowledge is disseminated, and you soak it up, and you challenge it to whatever degree you challenge it, but generally speaking, not too much, you know, and like that's how learning works, top down, right? And a lot of her book was like, no, right? Let's all be willing to be vulnerable. Let's all be willing to be human. Let me do what I'm asking you to do in our classroom, right? So that the structure of power that is inherent in academy, right, kind of inescapable, is at least a little less obvious in our learning environment. This is a shared space, right? So how do we share it, as opposed to like, I give, you receive, and that's the end of the ball game, you know? But not everybody knows that, not everybody has learned that. And so when I see people who are like just soaking, or not even soaking, just like, this is a waste of my time, whether on Facebook, or, you know, let me send an email or whatever, I'm like, you are wasting your time and mine, you know, because I know what a learning community can be when everyone is bought in, and you're not buying in. So if you don't care about being here, you don't have to be here, you know? I care about being here, right? Yeah, I want to be here, and so I'm here, and I'm here, you know? But if you don't want to be here, you don't have to be here. All you have to do is be willing to accept the consequences of not being here. That's it. And so I really I long to impart that to students who I feel like are bored or frustrated or annoyed, right? I mean, because
they haven't been through a process like that before, so they don't know what points they're going to experience.
Exactly. No one has taught them that, like, your education is your education. You decide what it's going to look like. You decide what you're going to get and what you're not going to get, you know? And if you're not getting something, ask about it, because maybe it's out there, but you just haven't asked about it. And I mean, Harvard has so many resources. Like, I don't know if I have ever been to a place with as much access to resources as Harvard before. Like, it's just insane, you know? So like, if you're dissatisfied with your educational experience, talk to someone, because you might be able to find that thing that you need. It might not be in this classroom, it might be in that one over there, or it might be in this conversation with these 4 random people or 8 random people or this talk or this lecture or this thing. But it's out there, but you have to go get it. You can't just be mad that it didn't come to you, you know?
Like something called you or brought you
To this space, yeah.
But you still have to explore that space, right? You still have to do the job of moving in and unpacking boxes.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
A little nesting here.
Yeah. And it's easy to fall into that trap because it's Harvard, right? These are the greatest scholars of their generation in the world, lecturing about whatever, you know? And we're all just learning. You have to be willing not to know in order to learn. You have to say, oh, I don't know. I can't answer that question. Maybe you can ask it differently. Maybe somebody else wants to take a shot at it. Because that's what learning is, right? Even in a place where you think you're supposed to know everything. So like, let's just not know together and discover what we can learn when we don't know together, and we figure out what the answers are.
What is the background diversity like? So you talked a little bit about the age difference.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So it's huge and not what I expected. So let's see, my incoming class is probably somewhere in the range of like 115, 140, like 115, 120, 130, somewhere in there. So it's a good size, right? I mean, I applied to a program here in Chicago that has an incoming cohort of 15, right? On the other end of the spectrum. So like, that's a good size, you know, 3 digits. And I think both have really great benefits. So I'm not throwing shade at either one. I love cohorts as a learning model. I love them. I just made a different choice. But anyway, and it's incredibly diverse. I'd say the youngest person is probably like 22. So I feel like the div school probably doesn't attract like the 16-year-old phenom who got an undergraduate degree, you know, and like Sheldon Cooper or something from that show or whatever. But there are people who came right out of college, you know, and so the youngest students are probably in their early 20s. I think there are some students in class who are like in their early to mid 60s as well. So it's a pretty wide age range. Yeah. I am in class with a lot of different people who believe a lot of different things and who practice a lot of different things. There are some ascetics in my incoming cohort, and they're not all getting like degrees, right? They're studying for a year or semesters, but there's a woman who's from a spiritual community in Texas, I think. Maybe she's from Texas, but her spiritual community is in India. I'm not sure. She's taken vows. There are a couple of monks from India who are studying for a little while. Excuse me. It's incredibly diverse. I have met, so many folks who are Muslim and Buddhist, and again, different ways of being those things. So like, there's language to describe the American Buddhist diaspora. And diaspora is not even the right word, because diaspora usually describes people from another country who are sort of spread around the world. And that's not what I mean. I mean like Americans who practice Buddhism who are born in America, but who don't hail from countries that have Buddhism as its as an origin religion. I don't know what the word is because I'm not well versed in the Buddhist community. But so many different kinds of people practicing so many different kinds of religion, or none at all. So it's incredibly diverse and it's delightful in that way. I am candidly lonely by how few African American and Black students there are in my cohort. That number is small. And I am surprised that in a cohort as large as mine is, with as much diversity as it has, there aren't more Black and African American students. I mean, there are any number of reasons for that. And I don't work in admissions, so I can't articulate them. I could speculate, but I don't know. But I remember feeling like looking around during orientation, being like, where are people who look like me? And not seeing that many of them, or not seeing as many as I expected to see. And like, that feels a little lonely. Now, having said that, there's definitely an African-American group at HDS, and we're tiny but mighty, you know. And so like that's a, you know, I mean, and I'm again not new to this whole academic thing. Like, I get what that is, you know. So it wasn't like I'm righteously indignant about it, you know, but it's true. And Boston is a town that, again, is diverse, but I also don't see a lot of folks who look like me on the street. And
kind of some specific ways.
Yeah.
Which I found really interesting.
And I mean, I to be fair to Boston, I haven't explored very much, you know. And I have a very particular vantage point about it right now, but I haven't explored it very much. So I'm hoping that my vantage point about it will deepen and broaden as my time there extends, you know. So, I mean, it's a really great group. There are people who are, most of us there are getting a 2-year degree called a Masters of Theological Studies, or MTS, right? Like any other university, Harvard just loves its acronyms. So most of the students in my cohort are 2-year MTS students. And the MTS is like a Masters of Religious Studies. I mean, that's what it is, or theological in this case. But it is the interim degree between an undergraduate degree and a PhD in something, whether it's religion or history or gender studies or whatever else, right? And you know, for some folks it's terminal, for some folks it's not. It really depends on what you're doing, right? And then my cohort of MDiv students, the Masters of Divinity, is a 3-year program. It's there's about 48 of us, something like that, within that larger cohort. And it's a 3-year degree, and it's generally built for folks who are interested in ministry, interested in direct service. Now, that does not to say you can't get a PhD, right? I've met many people who have an MDiv and a PhD. And again, a lot of the faculty I've met this year, or this semester, have an MDiv and PhD. I told my husband that he should find the biggest book he can and hit me with it if I ever start talking about a PhD. I know, maybe I shouldn't make that joke. But like, you know, I mean, 10 or 15, 20 years ago, I talked about a PhD, but, you know, as much as I love school, as much as I love study, someone described it to me this semester, a PhD being, a PhD is like a pie eating contest, and the first prize is more pie. I was kind of like, nothing about that sounds good. I was like, that sounds really accurate and like not a game I'm interested in playing, right? So I'm like, I don't think this is, I think I really want to be working with people, right? I love teaching. I love relationship. So like, and you know, a lot of the PhDs I know are in the classroom, so that's great. But like, I don't know, yeah. I don't know if I want another session.
Yeah. A little bit here and then
Exactly. And it's hard for me to imagine. And at that point, I'll be older than I am now. And it's hard for me to imagine dedicating another 5 or 6 years to more study before I get to like hit the ground and do. So I'm like, nah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Who has the time?
Awesome. Yeah. Let me see. Well, I think, cool. All right. Still good.
Okay.
Last question. Or maybe second to last question.
Okay.
Let's see where this goes.
Sure.
So, I guess, are you interacting with other people who are teachers in your group? And how do you sense that, like, have discussions about how can teachers make these kinds of discussions and this kinds of navigation more accessible for people? Or is this work like you're just kind of thinking on yourself because you're a teacher in a kind of a very specific and special field, perhaps different than some of your cohorts.
Sure. That's a good question. You know, actually, there are a fair number of yoga teachers in my incoming cohort.
Nice.
Yeah, there's like 6 of us or something. It's kind of delightful and remarkable, which is why to get together, we've sort of built this like HDS shala. So I don't have to teach all the time, which is, it would be fine, but it's also nice not to have to hold that space every week, you know, or whatever. And so I haven't had many conversations with them about like what it is to hold the yoga asana space, and like what it means to hold it here, and like how it gets shaped differently than if we were teaching in a studio or a church basement or a gym or a park, a public park, or any of the other places where yoga can show up, a workplace, an office, community center, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of the conversations that I have with teachers right now, yoga teachers specifically right now, is actually in the digital space, is in places like Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. Twitter to a lesser extent, we talk about other stuff. I talk about other stuff, but I'm grateful for the conversations that I do have with teachers, because they remind me of the other contexts outside of my own, that these conversations are also happening, right? It's easy anytime anyone is in school, and it happens to me every time I'm in school, for it to feel like a very insular experience, right? If I didn't want to, I wouldn't ever have to leave Cambridge. That's what happened this first semester. I just had my head down, and all I did was, go to school and come home, and go to school and come home, And so it's really easy to believe that like the world that I circumscribe is the entire world. That's not the truth, right? And so it's nice to be able to like poke a hole in that bubble and like see what else I can see, and like ask someone to talk to me about what's out there, or like poke a hole in this bubble on this side and like talk to another teacher who's maybe in a similar bubble, but like, how do we get out of this? What do we do? You want to go to this other class over here or whatever? So I think a lot about being a teacher at Harvard, because I'm with teachers a lot at Harvard, but they're not teaching what I teach, right? So, I'm in classrooms a lot, I'm sitting a lot, I'm reading a lot, I'm writing a lot. These are things I enjoy, but I'm not learning from or dealing with people who are thinking that much, or at least who are displaying that they are thinking that much about the relationship between like the fact that I've been sitting at this table for 2 hours, and how that affects my knees or my hips or my spine, and how those joints and their state affect my ability to continue to listen, or integrate or respond to questions that are being asked. Or what it means to, for instance, one thing that I've relearned about myself this semester is that my writing practice is a very physical one. So there are beautiful libraries on campus at Harvard, and I like to check a lot of them out, right? Widener is this massive, like it looks like a friend of mine described it as like the Harry Potter library, like rows and rows of books, and the law library looks like that too, only it's full of like over caffeinated, like very focused type A personalities who are like reading all kinds of law texts. You can really get a lot done in the law library because the air around you is so focused. It's exactly right. The prana is so focused, you can get a lot done. But the theology library, Andover Harvard Theological Library is what it's called. I think that's what it's called. Is very soft, and there's plenty of work. It's very focused, like beautiful text. Like you see text in Sanskrit and German and French and Latin and Greek and Arabic and Hebrew, and it's like you just want to like rub the books on your. That's how I feel. Again, embodied. I just want to like rub my face on all these books and be like soak it into my face. But when I write, I like to take my shoes and socks off so I can feel the ground underneath my feet. I like to move around. I like to read out loud. And you can't do that at the library when there are like 5 other people on the floor who are also trying to get work done. Yeah, like what the hell are you doing? Now I'm not above like a handstand or a headstand in the stacks. I have done that before, but that's probably about as far as I'll go. So I'm like, okay, on days you need to write, you need to take that home, because at home you can do whatever you want. You can run in your pajamas, you can eat yogurt in front of your computer, you can do it any way you want to. But like on the days where you need to like read and be focused, you have a thing to accomplish by 2 p.m. before you go to class at 3. Like those are great library days, So there's a lot of like relearning that's happening for me, and I'm thinking a lot about what it means to be a teacher. And I don't think I would have ever used a word like sacred to describe it before this semester. Maybe. That seems almost unbelievable, because I feel very fortunate. I am very fortunate to have had learning experiences with some really great teachers here at Tejas Yoga, in other places that I've studied with other yoga teachers, in my arts degree at Columbia College, and even back in my undergraduate degree. I've been exposed to a lot of really great teachers, and some that weren't very good, you know. I haven't been exposed to any teachers that weren't good here at Tejas, but some that weren't good. And so I've learned a lot about what good teaching is. And even at an institution that's like, it's the oldest university in America, the first college ever constructed by slaves in our country, right? Even there, like, not all pedagogy is good pedagogy, right? So, I mean, you're working with these incredible scholars, but not all of them are great teachers. And so it's been really clear to me to discover, like, oh, this teaching thing, this is as much a calling as anything else, as pastorship or ministry or medicine or whatever else a person can feel in their soul they must do. Like, teaching is as much
I
that,
truly believe that.
you know?
That's something I've also really started to feel and kind of sit with me comfortable. It's like, no, this is enough. And this is worthy. It's not like, I'm doing this instead of that. You know, it's sort of, you know, because my industry is full of like other things we could do that might seem more glamorous or more like, and you know, the teaching part can seem very sort of made out to be like it's a lesser than.
Yeah.
You know, it's a attack on also do this thing.
Right.
And as you know, saying like being exposed to other really good teachers and seeing like that as an art.
Yeah.
That is something you feel deep in the body you must do.
Yeah.
And you must be around others who do. Like that is enough.
Yeah.
That is a thing.
Yeah. And
I also didn't always think that.
Right. And it's not easy, and it takes craft, right? It takes skill. So when you find a teacher who's really gifted, like, lean into it and don't lose hope or touch or track, right? Which is why I come back here, even though I'm out there, right? Because my teachers are here. And I'm like, oh, I need to fill up my battery, you know, before I go back to the East Coast. And they know these things. I remember learning this at their feet, at their knee, you know, like, okay, who do I know I am? Because I've been their student. And like, what does that mean for how I am in the world, you know? So it's a great gift to have people in your life that can show you like what good teaching is. And frankly, can show you what bad teaching is, you know? I mean, I was saying this to a friend of mine yesterday, is that I am sure that I've picked up idiosyncrasies of my teacher, right? Because you do, right? When you study with someone for a prolonged period of time, you learn what they're great at, but you also learn what they're not so good at. And you have your own, like, again, set of baggage about what you're great at and what you're not so good at. So it's this kind of ever-evolving, constant self-reflecting practice, right? Where you've never reached a pinnacle of education that you can just coast on, you know? Because every time new people step into your room, and every time the same people step into your room, they're different on that day, right? And so how they show up and how you meet them in that space is never the same. It's always different. So you have to recognize that and tune into that. Good teaching always takes a lot out of you, always, you know? Yeah. So I feel very lucky to have been exposed to such great teachers, and I believe that teaching is a part of what I am meant to do, and I don't yet know how that will take shape in the future. I know that I quite simply just love teaching yoga classes, and so at the very least, I will keep teaching yoga. If anyone will hire me or let me, if anyone in Boston wants me to teach a yoga class for them, like, I'll keep doing it because I love to do it. You know, it means it's such a generative practice. I think for me, you know, it takes a lot out, but it gives a lot back. Absolutely. Yeah. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here with you. I want to. Is there time for me to ask you a question or two?
Oh, sure.
I don't have any questions planned, but like I'm so like, again, just like, oh, I have such a heart space for the work that you do. So one of the assignments that I had to do, and you saw this online, one of the assignments that I had to do this fall in my Intro to Ministry Studies class was build these ministry projects, which was very sort of vague and in the best way possible, vague and like spacious, that's the word, just like opportunity to like build a thing that might minister to people. And so what I did was I sort of adapted the tea meditation, one of the tea meditations that I learned from you. And I would love to hear you talk about what you have discovered, folks discover about that as a practice. I didn't know how new or not new it was for people. And so and because we weren't able to do it in person, like that felt such an important part of the thing that you shared, was that like we were two bodies in space with the experience of this thing. And I couldn't manifest that for them. So I had to kind of front load all of their needs and then hope that they could kind of take it and deal with it. And it didn't feel perhaps as resonant as it felt for me in space with you. And so I'm wondering, like, what do you discover folks resonate with about that as a practice?
I think some of the most common points people bring up are what it feels like to take time. That they didn't have the awareness until doing something like that they have time. They have the ability to, extend and contract time. And they have the ability to, I describe it as seeing the moments between spaces. And that as you sink more into a tea practice and start studying things like movement and go with it, you start realizing how much more opportunity you have for individualized small movements and what that feels like in the body. So rather than something like I describe as like multitasking, right? So if I want to fill up my guidelin here with this kettle, I can kind of do this all as like one thing, right? Or I can pick it up and realize this is one motion and come back here. And now that I've picked it up, my second thing I want to do is to fill this. I can take the lid off. I can place the lid down. I don't have to
hold it.
Place it down. I can use my other hand to support this. Add more water, nice and slow. Just observing it. And then when it's done, there is a moment where I stop, and then I set this down. Come back. So not like from here to here. Back. Then I can take this back. So on, right? And it doesn't have to take a long time. It's just you notice these beats, like a heartbeat, like these individual things. And people have not looked at the world in that way. And they start seeing how they can break down lots of things, even like crafting an email to somebody, right? The chores that you do at home, things like you have time and it feels less dense inside. And kind of relatedly, other things that people point out are just what internal texture feels like when you're drinking something and you're embodying it and you feel inside again versus only feeling
outside. Top level.
And both of those things together really help increase expansion. So people tend to kind of get giddy when they notice and feel in that way again. It's so beautiful to hear you talk about it. I think that when you poured this oolong today, and part of what I remember about our first class together was the way that, again, that the tea moved in my body, like what it did in my head and what it did in my chest and what it did in my belly, and how easy it is for us to move through life unaware of those sensations, and what they have to offer us. And what it's like when you go for too long
without tuning into that.
It's kind of like that you get that craving to just, you need to sit, you need to be still. For some folks, it's that craving like you need to be on your mat, you need to go for a walk. And when you can notice a sensation and you can do something about it, instead of just ignoring it.
What is one piece of advice that you would give to anyone about how to engage tea on a consistent level in their lives? And maybe, in pursuit of it being like accessible to as many folks as possible, right? We don't have to run out and spend like $40 on some like high blend from the mountains of wherever, although we can if we want to, but like, if we're just looking for, again, a little of that expansion of time, and like, we want to make like 5 or 10 minutes in a day. I mean, it's January now, so we're all on our like New Year's resolution, kind of like new habit for the New Year's kick, right? So like what's like one piece or maybe a few pieces of advice that you might give to folks about like how to incorporate a practice like this into day to day without having to restructure all the things?
Mm-hmm. Just try,
Mm.
first of all, and like realize that trial and error are a little bit part of it.
Oh,
and I think error is like a strong word. It's just kind of that tends to go together with it. But it's not really like a wrong.
Yeah.
You know, but just try stuff. So maybe you start to notice you do it a couple mornings in a row, and then it just feels like that's not a good time for you. Maybe your mornings are just so tight on time, and getting up earlier is just not going to feel good and realistic to you. You feel rushed, and this isn't helping. Okay, that's cool. So what about your lunch break? You know, if you are on believe me, like I am aware of what it feels like to be on a timed lunch break. You know, like I worked a lot of years where I had a 30-minute lunch. And I will be honest, like that did some long-term effect to me about how I eat. I won't always eat really fast now. It's just
ingrained, right?
You know, but can you take at least like of that 30 minutes? Can you take maybe just 5 of it? You know, maybe you have your tea with you, you're drinking tea while you're eating lunch, but can you separate the eating part from the drinking part for just 5 minutes? Put the utensils down and spend just 5 minutes, even with a timer. Just eat with the tea for that. Does it feel okay to do your lunch out? What about like late afternoon? Do you have a time where there's a little bit of lull between activities and your energy kind of drops? That might be a good time to meet with the tea for 10 minutes, maybe one that's a little bit more energetic, a little bit more uplifting, and helps you feel the ground beneath you. But just be willing to try. Because that's kind of the thing is, you know, I feel like with anything, you know, but tea especially because there's so many options, people can get not only overwhelmed, but maybe a little bit disappointed that it's not doing the thing that it did the first time.
Interesting. Again, that like, what is the practice today question, right? Yeah.
And so they don't realize that, you know, there's a little bit of give and take with that. But in the end, what is the worst that happens? You just drink more tea.
Right.
Like it's still, you're still consuming the thing that is really good for you, that is nourishing for you. You did nothing wrong. Just because it doesn't feel the same way. You're just testing new things.
Trust the practice, right?
Just trust the practice.
Trust
just
roll.
try. Just try different things and realize that it doesn't have to be like a big chunk of time. You know, I teach hour-long or 90-minute classes because that's the learning time. But the actual practice can be like 10 minutes. You know, and the reason why I say 10 minutes is because that's about how long it takes for like you heat up water, pour the water cools down enough so you can drink it. That whole circle is about 10 minutes. You could set a timer if you want. You can do like journaling if you were waiting for the water to cool or something like that. It's a practice.
That's beautiful.
You know? It doesn't, and the thing is, it's really nice is I find when you stay with it, and when you kind of hang around people who drink a lot of tea, you realize tea people have like an ability to just sit and do this for hours. To just like, that's just, it's kind of like yogis who just like, they're constantly like moving and stretching, massaging, and just kind of like very embodied, aware and touching the body, right? You can almost just make out someone's like a yoga teacher or has a really committed practice because even when they're sitting there, it's like feeling stuff, right? So tea people, they can sit and they can drink some tea. And you can get to that place if you want to, but you just try. Just be willing to try some things.
That's beautiful. Thank you, sis.
You're welcome.
Thanks for being here. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited.
Well, oh my gosh, like there's just so much we can have in this conversation. I think we might have to have another one.
I would love to.
Like a little bit of So thank you so much for sharing.
It's been my great pleasure.
Your amazing perspective and your learnings and just the path that you're on.
Thank you.
I think it's huge because at the end of the day, what I would love to see more people being able to view aspects of their life through this little window, you know, this window that is, as you said, also, right? And it's something that I try to incorporate into tea classes in a really gentle way. Because it can't be very forward. It's not, I'm not there to like, you know, to preach tea to anybody, as it were. But that thing that they feel, like you asked about, what do people feel and how they respond to me, like they're responding to that sense of the also divinity.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that there is, they're responding to that, they're feeling that, and it's such a wonderful thing to see. And it's something that I think for tea practice and tea lifestyle, and especially in the US, to be more complete than what it is now. It needs to be there. It kind of suffers from the same short sight that you know, yoga in some places can suffer from, where it's a physical thing and it's a complete body. You might feel good, you might feel those endorphins going, but it doesn't feel something more than it could be there. It could be really, really awesome if we allow this space to exist and use the language for it, as you say. We can learn that language too. So thank you for sharing that insight.
Oh, well, I mean, I'll keep doing the work if you keep doing the work.
And I will share links to like your blog and your newsletter.
Oh, thank you.
So you can follow your amazing writing.
Thank you.
And your journey. So
I mean, it's honest, it's sincere, and it's truthful, if nothing else.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching and for being part of this. So if you're new to this community, if you haven't watched any of the interviews before, so the BT monthly interviews are supported with, the PBS would say, viewers like you. I have monthly classes and programming that I offer on my Patreon page, which I'll include a link to as well. It's patreon.com/BT, where you can take new tea classes on tea meditation and learning about tea every month. And it's thanks to those generous supporters that we're able to do this wonderful work. So thank you for being here and for participating. And we'll see you next time. Bye.